gentlemen, and welcome to another bright and shiny morning here at B2B Breakfast to Business with your morning girl, Bea Lim, also the Managing Director of Team Asia, and super excited for today's topic as well. So guys, it's November. I can't believe it myself. You know, we were just talking last April about how the world has completely changed. And, you know, several months in, we're actually still in the middle of several lockdowns and still so many changes happening. And, you know, next thing we know, guys, it's going to be December. It's going to be the Christmas season. And then we're going to have a gap week between Christmas and New Year when we actually start thinking of what to do in 2021, which is the nearest quote-unquote future we can think about. And so with all of that jazz happening in just a couple of weeks, we couldn't help but think that planning for 2021 is a little different because of what we're experiencing now. So, you know, we just also got word that, you know, we're still under general community quarantine until the end of November. And so we're going to start thinking, does 2021 or the near future actually entail us wearing masks and face shields all day, every day? Does it also mean that we're going to have to focus on disinfecting measures, disinfectants, and all the other health protocols as we go into 2021? Are there going to be more demand for health-related benefits also for our jobs? Or, as we discussed last week with my good friend Jason Cruz, are we going to be working from home permanently, or at least in the next 2 years? Because that's actually the trend that a lot of these different companies, whether we're big or small or large conglomerates, are actually going into because of the pandemic and also because of sustainability measures. And so with all of those questions and conversations we've been having on the now normal and the reality of it, one of the things that really stuck with us is that we keep on talking about change. We keep on talking about change and how, you know, this is so cliche already, but it's so true about how the only thing constant in this world is change. But really, have we spoken about how we are responding to change, especially with change so big such as this? We've talked about what's at our core, why we're here in the first place. How do we build meaningful connections with people given the limited movements we have? We talked about the reality of what it means for us to actually, you know, lose interaction, physical interaction because of the work from home situation. And so today we felt like, hey, you know what? We need a little help talking about, you know, the future and how so many of these big world changes are actually defining how the future is going to be for us. And so on that note, I couldn't think of anybody better to talk about the future and what it will do for us and the changes we're about to see, then my good friend Maulik Parekh, who is a fantastic and inspiring speaker and actually also author, guys. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're going to be sharing with you some awesome stuff later on. But we felt that he was the perfect person to talk about change in this very disruptive world that is evolving every second of every minute of every day because of what's happening around us. So Maulik is an award-winning entrepreneur, serial angel investor, and a highly sought-after keynote speaker. He has inspired thousands of leaders and individuals, including me. He has spoken a lot on aiming high and inspiring other people, paying it forward, and really looking in within you to find that strength to be able to be leaders that we need today. He is a fantastic CEO that has really inspired so many other people. He has led global companies such as Inspiro and SPI Global to win over 100 awards, including Best Company of the Year, Best Employer of the Year, and Best Leadership Team of the Year. And because of this, of course, he was the ICT CEO of the Year. And I'm so lucky that he said yes to B2B Breakfast to Business so that he can equally inspire us to take on the changes we are experiencing today and make it a reality for us. So Maulik, thank you so much for being part of our breakfast conversation this morning.
Hey, good morning, Bea, and thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of your show And I'm so happy that I'm the lucky number 13 in terms
Yes.
of your episode. Yeah.
Of season 2. And Maulik, here at B2B, we really wanted to talk to real life people who have real life stories that can change the world and can help us change the world for the better as well. And you are that lucky number 13 that is bringing your wisdom into B2B. So maraming salamat, and thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. So Maulik, my first question is, how are you? I was just talking about how the world has changed, like, and it's changing as we speak. How are you doing? How have you coped with all the world changes since the start of the year?
When I was listening to you introducing the podcast, I was thinking about this quote that I've always heard of, but I never spent time thinking about it, and you may have heard of it as well. And it says, life is what happens to you when you have other plans. And, this last 7, 8 months have made me realize the importance of that. I mean, you probably have heard another quote that says, if you want to make God laugh, then make a plan. And I think God is really laughing a lot this year, because we all had our plans for 2020, and clearly we had to adjust those plans. And in my case, I was looking at an amazing 2020. I was looking at ending my CEO stint on March of this year. And my plan was to then travel for the next 9 months, some with family, some with my photography gear, and travel to 9 different countries. And unfortunately, one by one, we had to cancel all of the plans. So, it's a completely different 2020 than what I imagined in the beginning of the year. If last year, at the same time, you would have asked me, hey, what are you going to do in 2020? I would have said, oh my God, I have so many plans, and here are all the countries I'm going to, and all the great places that I'll be visiting.
I know, and so Maulik already shared it with you guys, ladies and gentlemen. He is also a photographer, and I can just imagine, Maulik, how heartbreaking it was for you to actually cancel on those trips, because those are your creative outlets.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, places like Japan during the cherry blossom, then going to India for the tiger safari, then coming back and taking the family to Italy, in the southern part of Italy, then coming back and going to Indonesia for a safari with orangutans, then going to Kenya for an African safari, the real safari. So amazing plans. I mean, I can't believe that all of those plans have gone down the drain. But I'm excited. All of the people that I've been working with, they've been so kind, and they told me that, hey, don't worry about not doing any of this this year. Would love to have you next year. So I think essentially what will happen is 2021 will become basically what was supposed to be the 2020.
Yes, but then Maulik, that quote that you said was actually said by John Lennon. He's the Beatles,
Mm.
so I love the Beatles. They've also really inspired us all with their songs, and it's true. Like, life is what happens when you make other plans, and I guess there was a reason for us, right, to have had to hunker down a bit for 2020, minus the plans that we had. And that's just life. And actually, I really do feel, and I know you're going to talk about this later, that
Yeah.
while 2020 has really been a fantastic roller coaster for all of us, we do have silver linings
Yes.
that we've been able to experience throughout the year. But before we tell everybody, Maulik, what you have in store for them, I do want to do like a quick icebreaker,
Mm.
because this is something that I've really wanted to ask you. Given that you
Yes.
always talk about inspiration, future, and change, right? I want to pick on your brains a bit. If you were to describe what you think the future will be, future
Mhm.
being like tomorrow up until 2021, or God knows what would be the 3 words that you would describe the future with?
You know, if I didn't spend time working on the project that we'll be talking about in a minute, I would have a different answer to it. I'll probably have some swear words that you need to bleep out about the future. But I think now, having spent so much time thinking about the future, the 3 words that come to my mind Our future is fun. Future is meaningful. And most importantly, future is transformational. It forces you to evolve and adapt and change and be the best that you can be.
I love the last word, Maulik, which is transformation. Because a lot of people have actually used the word change and evolution interchangeably, right? They've spoken like, our world is changing, our world is evolving. But I love that you said the word transformation because there's something different about it. It's like almost like a metamorphosis, right? You start
Yeah.
with this and then you go through a growth journey that makes it even more meaningful when you come out of the other side. If I were to also, you know, share with you my definition of the future as well, I think that aside from it being fun, I love what your terms were: fun, meaningful, and transformational. I also feel that the future is actually going to be exciting because of all of the growth we've experienced in the past couple
Mhm.
of months everywhere and everyone in this world. We've really experienced something different this past year. But more than that also is that it's going to be unpredictable, but at the same time also full of lessons, right? It's like
Mhm.
unpredictable because if there's anything we learned in the past couple of months, it's that we don't know what's going to happen next. And we're sort of like leaving things to chance as we continue to study or scope out the area with what's going on. And I believe that it is unpredictable. The future has always been unpredictable, but I guess before we always had like the nuggets of wisdom of our sage
Mhm.
advice, the sage words of other people,
Mhm.
best practices or research. But then now, some of those things have actually become obsolete, right? Like suddenly you can only research so much because so many things have changed. So I also feel though that while the future is unpredictable, there are so many things that we can learn about from the past, right, that can
Mhm.
actually help us grow into this. What do you think about that in terms of making decisions for the future with the big word unpredictable looming in our heads, especially with COVID-19?
No, I think that's an excellent question. And in fact, one of the reasons why I worked on the project that we'll be talking about. But one of the things, if you look at all the big events that happened in the past, when we thought the world was coming to an end, let's just start with 9/11 that we can all relate to recently. When that happened, I remember exactly where I was. And I remember many news headlines that came for many weeks following that event. And everybody was forecasting that the air travel is going to go down the drain. Nobody's going to feel comfortable traveling again through air. And what happened? 6 months down the road, everything was back to normal. Yes, there was more security at the airport, but then people forgot about 9/11. And we'll keep remembering that event now every year when there is an anniversary of that event that happening. If you look at even the Spanish flu that took place in 1918, when was the last time you and I, or anybody for that matter, thought about Spanish flu in our consciousness? We only started thinking about it when we had coronavirus epidemic that we are all facing with. So if you look back at what happened then, that incident took millions of lives, but it ended in the summer of 1919. And after that, life again started to go back to normal, and people forgot about what happened with Spanish flu. So while we are going through this epidemic, I think one thing the history teaches us is that nothing lasts long. Everything passes on. And we have to then think about whether when we are in 2030, for example, when we are in year 2030, 10 years from now, when we'll be looking back, would we be thinking about coronavirus or COVID-19 as much as we are thinking today? Would that be at the top of our consciousness all the time? No, because COVID-19 would be the past. And at that time, what we'll be facing with are the other forces and other disruptions that are taking place at that time in our lives. And those are the disruptions and those are the forces that we should be thinking about and prepare ourselves for, not be so stuck with the current crisis.
I love that. Thank you so much for giving us that reminder, Maulik, because there are times when we are bogged down, right, by what's happening. Like what you said, at that moment, you know the headlines. It's not easy also because we're all attached to the online space, to our devices right now, and we are given news day in, day out of what's happening in the global crisis and how it has actually also affected our economies, various industries, our businesses. And so it's good of a reminder to actually say that, hey, you know what, life will go on. And there are certain things that we actually have to also be thinking about, not just what's happening at the present moment. On that note, I can't wait but actually to tell already all of our listeners why we're actually here today and why Maulik is already like giving us nuggets of wisdom as he goes along. It's because while all of the different changes in the world has been happening, our good friend Maulik, ladies and gentlemen, has actually been writing his first ever book. And I'm super excited to be talking about it here at Breakfast to Business because Maulik wrote a book on future proofing your company and career. And this is such a beautiful piece of literature, of advice, of experience, of wisdom that we want to talk about, especially at a time when we feel we may not actually be able to talk about the future, or some people are fearful of that, or whatnot. So, today I want to ask Maulik about his book, about the things that he feels we should be doing to grab the future and define it ourselves. So, Maulik, can you talk about this special project? What's it about? How did you start with it? And why this topic? Go ahead.
Thank you. So I've been dying to start talking about it, but thank you for now giving me the cue to go forward with it. Uh, I think one of the reasons I wanted to do that was because I felt that when the COVID-19 happened, and by the way, 90% of the book was written after the COVID-19 crisis hit us, starting March onwards. And the reason I thought it was important to write that is because I felt that everybody was in this quadrant called urgent and important. All of us had our heads in the sand so deep that we forgot to start looking at the horizon and see all the disruptive forces coming together and not preparing for them. So, as a leader, it's so important to not only take care of the matters that are urgent and important, the crises or the escalations or the issues that we need to fix today, but also we need to be in what I call the magic quadrant in my speeches with people. And the magic quadrant is not urgent, but important matters. So, artificial intelligence, for example, is not an urgent issue like COVID 19, but it's slowly creeping into our workplaces. And 10 years down the road, it will become an urgent issue. Digital natives are not an urgent issue today, but the way they are storming the workplace and the way they are transforming the workplace, they are going to become a disruptive forces 10 years down the road. The gig economy is not the disruptive force as COVID-19, but you give it 10 more years and it's going to be a very disruptive force for our lives. So we should do both. We should be able to fix the issues that are coming out because of the COVID-19, but we should also take a step back and look at the horizon and pay attention to the forces that are colliding together and creating a perfect storm that at one point in our life we'll have to pass through.
Absolutely. I loved what you said, that the magic quadrant, right? It's like being able to actually take a look at what's around, not necessarily what's screaming at you right now, but actually things that they're sort of like clues, right? Things that are happening now bit by bit that will actually really make a huge impact not only on our lives, but our workspace, our work environment, our careers, and how the future is going to be run, right? Malik, do you mind actually talking about these disruptive forces even more? Like, why do you think they're so important? And why is it important for us to keep that in the horizon?
Sure. So, when I started thinking about where the future was heading, the idea for the book actually germinated in my mind some 3, 4 years ago. As you know, while I was a CEO of Inspiro, one of the things I noticed was the world at work was changing dramatically. And I sense that artificial intelligence was changing the types of communication we are having with our customers, because a lot of the customers were now going to the websites of the companies they were doing business with and getting the answers they need from the self-help or the chatbots. So while we would receive 100 calls just 10, 15 years ago, now because of the AI, we are only receiving 30 or 40 calls. So it is already making a significant impact in at least the BPO industry. I also noticed that in the last 3 years, almost 100% of the people that we hired were either millennials or Gen Zers. Again, because BPO attracts young people typically, but it was amazing to see that these young people were storming the workplace and they were different breed altogether. I know you are a millennial, so you can probably relate to this different breed altogether. And the third factor that I noticed was that the gig economy was becoming popular. People were starting to realize that they don't need to now leave the Philippines and go to the US or go to Europe to become an OFW, earn some money, and send it back to their family. Because of the freelancing platforms, they can actually be in the Philippines, live with their families, be in the community they grew up in, and yet work in an international setting. And these three forces I felt were so powerful and they were gaining such momentum that if they're having this minor impact to our businesses today, I can only imagine how that impact is going to be over the next 10 years. And just to kind of give you some statistics about it, artificial intelligence is tremendously impacting our businesses. The way they are taking care of not only what we would consider as boring and predictable work, but artificial intelligence is already now doing work that would require some reasoning, that would require some learning, that would require some thought process. Somehow, artificial intelligence is catching up with the human beings. The statistics around the gig economy is that by 2030, there is a study that was done, 50% of the US workforce is expected to be a part of gig economy. And today it's around 35%. So there's going to be a big change in the number of people who get attracted to this freelancing world. In the countries like the Philippines and India, that number is going to be even significantly higher. The digital natives, by 2030, 2/3 of the workforce will be made up of millennials and Gen Zers. And the last batch of baby boomers would have retired by then. So imagine the whole makeup of the workplace would be so different. The people we are seeing as interns today or entry-level employees would be sitting in influential positions. They'll be sitting in the C-suites and not only influencing the businesses, but also the politics and the societies in general.
No, absolutely. And I can just imagine also, Maulik, if we are seeing so many changes on the tech side right now, can we just imagine also the many things these digital natives in this gig economy can actually come up with that will be used in the workplace? Like all of the tech, all of the process changes and the like, it's really going to make a huge difference. So I can understand why you feel also, or that you really do believe that these are the things that we shouldn't just be talking about surface level, but we should be understanding it and be ready as we move towards that future. I do have a question, Molly, because you touched on very interesting statistics as well. Being in the Philippines for so long, do you think that there is a force that is more prominent? I mean, those are all disruptive forces, but do you think that there is one that stands out between the three here in the country?
Well, because the world is so connected now and because of the economies are so intertwined, it's very hard for one force to impact only one part of the world and not the others. But if I look at the three forces, I think the one that would have the most disruptive effect on the Philippines economy is the freelancing. Because if you think about 10% of your GDP here comes from OFW remittances, people who leave the Philippines, work in different parts of the world, and send the money back. Now you're going to have what I consider the people who are not living to other parts of the world, staying in the Philippines and creating wealth for them and their families. So the whole concept of OFW is going to be very different going forward. You will also countries like the Philippines would have to think about how do you prepare and how do you encourage this growing breed of freelancers so they can take a bigger chunk of the freelancing dollar in the marketplace.
Absolutely. And I think you touched also on the fact that if we are going to be expanding that market, then we're definitely going to need more infrastructure that will support that kind of economy, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've seen the government doing so well with the BPO industry is preparing almost 1.3 million workers doing so well in the BPO industry. I think the same kind of intensity, same kind of partnership within the government, educational institutions, and the private sector would need to happen for the freelancing to really take off. Just like we are talking so much about the BPO industry today, I think in the next 10 years, Philippines and countries like India and others would need to start thinking about how do they get the biggest chunk of the freelancing dollar coming from US, Europe, Australia, and some of the developed countries.
And I think we're also seeing that now. I mean, I know I don't mean to bring it back to COVID-19, but because of the situation, we've actually seen a big jump, right, in that space because we are within the confines of our homes, and with the shifting, business landscape, people have had to actually shift careers already during this particular time, right?
Yeah, I mean now it's because people are forced to, but a lot of the growth that the freelancing has experienced over the last 10 years or so, mainly because of platforms like Upwork and Freelancer, is because freedom is now a very important currency. Young people, especially Gen Zers, 53% of the Gen Zers are involved in freelancing. 40% of millennials are involved in freelancing because if you are asking them, would you like to work for somebody else or would you like to be your own boss? 72% of the high school students would say, I would like to be my own boss. That is a unique statistic that we haven't seen before, mainly because now they see that it's very easy to start a business. I mean, nowadays, what do you need to start a business? If you have a smartphone, if you have a tablet, or if you have a PC and an internet connectivity, you can be a freelancer. So the barrier to entry to become a freelancer is so low now compared to what it was before.
Absolutely. So going back into the three disruptive forces and how you feel that we should be looking at them as a whole as well. Do you think companies have to focus on all of them right away? Should they pick up one over the other to take advantage of for their businesses, or what do you think about that?
I think they need to look at it holistically. And the
Okay.
reason I wrote this book actually is because I felt that I saw many books. There are books written about only AI. There are books written about the gig economy. There are books written about the digital natives. But I felt that all of these books were approaching the subject very individually, very myopically. And I felt that as a business, you have to kind of take a step back and look at it holistically because they are essentially, even though they look very disparate, they look unrelated. How can the digital natives and the freelancing and the AI would have anything in common? You would ask that question, but they do have something in common, and that is they're all siblings. They all are born out of the digital revolution. So it would be a mistake for leaders to only focus on one and not the other two. You have to look at it holistically and see if you look at all these three forces, kind of project and extrapolate its impact over the next 10 years and be prepared for it.
Absolutely. So it's really about being able to see the big picture, right? See the
Yes,
big picture and then sort of like look into the how the puzzle pieces work
come
together,
together.
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So knowing this, Malik, that you really do believe we need to look at it holistically. Hey, we need to see the whole big picture. What do you think companies must strive to be, in this new age?
Sure. So I think the main premise of the book is that you need to have an informed perspective on what the future would be like. You cannot future proof yourself if you don't know what the future would be like. So in my book, I give 5 dimensions of the future that the businesses would grapple with. And then I tell them how to deal with each of these dimensions. So for the businesses, the number one dimension is the future is digital. And so companies would need to transform themselves. And this digital transformation is not really about technology. A lot of companies fail because they go and buy the latest and the greatest buzzword technology and stick it into their legacy system and hope that they will become digitally transformed. But it doesn't happen. Digital transformation is actually about taking a step back and asking yourself, how can I improve my employee experience? How can I improve my customer experience? How can I create value for my stakeholders? If you can do that, then you will succeed as a digital transformation as a initiative for your company. The second dimension that I talk about in the company is that future is meaningful, especially because of the Gen Zers and millennials. So companies must instill a very strong sense of purpose, because more than ever before, your customers and your employees are going to ask you, what are you committing to before they commit to your brand? They're going to ask you, what do you stand for before they stand with you? So it's very important now for companies to go beyond just the profit and the top line and the bottom line. They need to really think about what is the main purpose, what is the guiding principle for their company. The third dimension that I talk about in the book is the future is boundless. So companies would need to become very innovative. They have to unleash innovation because there are so many opportunities, but you won't be able to take advantage of these opportunities if you are still living with your old ways of thinking and your stale processes and bureaucracies coming from the past century. So you need to actually come up with your own definition for innovation. You will have to come up with your own strategy for innovation and flawlessly execute it. The fourth dimension that I talk about for the company is that future is new. Uh, there are many aspects of the future that we don't know. And so we would have to inspire learning. We will have to groom our workforce for tomorrow. That would mean that some of these people would require upskilling because there are skills that they need to learn. Some of them would require reskilling because they are completely doing a different job. Their jobs are being obsolete because of AI and other forces. And most of your employees would actually need to be trained to work and partner with AI. So companies would need to inspire learning as part of their process. And the last dimension of future is that future is fun. And it's up to the leaders whether future is fun or not, because it's going to be a difficult journey going forward. There are many changes happening. So running a business nowadays is extremely difficult, as you know, as one of the business owners. But it's up to you whether your employees are still going to have a ride of their lifetime, whether they're going to look back one day and say, you know what, that was the most amazing time I had working for XYZ company. Or they're going to say, oh my God, that was the worst part of my life. You know, it was a Monday to Friday nightmare that I had to deal with every single week. So it's up to the leader to decide whether the employees are going to have a great time while they're going through this journey or not. So those are the 5 dimensions and what companies need to do. Obviously, the book is 40,000 words, and I'm trying to make it as short and sweet as possible.
No, absolutely. Maulik, I feel you. Ladies and gentlemen, if Maulik and I had like 5 hours, we probably would just be still at dimension number two. So, yeah, and there's so many things, guys, that you can learn from Maulik in his book. He just mentioned the 5 dimensions that we can really take a look at, right? And see things big picture and see where, how you would like to define your future and how you can actually define it for your people as well. But if there was one thing, Maulik, that really stuck with me with what you said is at the end of the day, the future is boundless. And I love that that was the third dimension that you actually put in to your book, right? It is boundless. There's so many opportunities. There's so many things we also need to do to be able to grab those opportunities, right? Like we can't also just sit around and say, yep, opportunity came in and that's it, right? For us to actually truly be able to reap the benefits or to enjoy those opportunities, there, you know, we have to roll up our sleeves, right? We have to roll up our sleeves, change certain things, whether it's processes, things that you can see tangible, but it's also about changing mindsets, changing, you know, how you approach things, and making it fun, right, for our people. It is a difficult journey. Thank you for reminding people of that, because I think that right now what people think of is it's just so difficult. You know, every day it's quite difficult and we can't blame them. It is a tough world out there. But at the end of the day, while any, you know, journey is difficult or adventurous, it's also a perspective, right? How would you like to actually see this particular journey? Do you want to just see it as difficult, hard, strange, something that is all tears? Or do you see it as, like what you said earlier, transformative, something that is all about growth, opportunity, and the like? So, Maulik, that is so heartwarming. I'm sure a lot of business owners and business leaders are excited to read that from your book. But I hope you don't mind if I'm asking you about businesses or companies. I'd also like to touch on individuals and professionals, right? If there are certain dimensions we should be looking at as a business or as companies, how about those folks that are thinking about their future careers? What are the things that they have to strive for, or what are your pieces of advice for them at this
Sure.
point?
No, I think same as the businesses, you need to cultivate an informed perspective on what the future would be for you as a person, as a professional. And there are 5 dimensions that I talk about in the book. Number one, the future is AI. That train has left the station. It's not going back anymore. So how do you thrive in the world filled with AI? The best way to thrive is to be the kind of human that AI cannot replicate. AI cannot replicate our creativity. AI cannot replicate our intuition. AI doesn't get inspiration. AI doesn't know how to deal with unpredictable, unexpected situations. They are not resourceful. AI cannot inspire people. So if you take a step back and say, okay, if those are the things AI cannot do, the best way I can ensure that AI would not take my job and make me jobless is to be the best I can be in those dimensions. You know, be creative, have empathy. You know, malasakit is a beautiful word in Tagalog language. Have more of that when you go to work, because AI would not be able to understand malasakit. It would be an enigma for AI. So that's the first dimension, that future is AI. So be a human, a fully unleashed human. The second dimension is that future is change. So instead of passively accepting it or denying it, it is so important, if you want to thrive going forward, to become a catalyst for it, to champion the change, to say no more to mediocrity, to say no more to nonsensical and unfair, and become a positive influence who brings about better change so people around you are living a better life. If you can become a catalyst for change, a positive change, then your professional career will continue to thrive. The third element is future is people. So be an alchemist. People are not going anywhere for the next 10 years. So we are not going to live in a world where suddenly everything is done by technology. So we'll still have to deal with people. In fact, people's role is going to be even more important, because it will rely on them being creative, on them being emotionally intelligent, you know, having a higher EQ. So you have to be an alchemist that brings out the best in other people, that brings out the best in yourself, but also other people. If you can do that, then you will continue to thrive in your future going forward. Future is turbulent. That's the fourth dimension. Because there are many changes that will continue to happen. You see, if you look at the news nowadays, there are businesses, companies, and industries becoming obsolete. You hear about jobs and skills becoming irrelevant. The disruption is gaining speed. So the future going forward is turbulent. So how do you thrive in that? You have to be the captain that can keep his or her calm and poise while going through a treacherous terrain. If you can have that calmness about you while taking your team through this turbulent weather going forward, then your future is proof, you're future proof going forward. And the last element is that future is unknown. So be a futurist. And when we talk about being a futurist, I'm not talking about becoming a professional futurist like there are many others in the world. I'm talking about paying attention to the clues and trends that we are surrounded by. If you are noticing young people learning new skills through YouTube, if you notice young kids not even paying attention to 15-second TikTok video, that's a clue about where the world is going. If you hear about Hyundai partnering with Uber for flying cars, that's a clue as to where the world is going. So pay attention to all the clues that we are surrounded with and study them, synthesize them, and then extrapolate as to how that would play out in the next 10 years and see how that impact your life. If you can do that, then your career is future proof. Again, trying to distill it in as less words as possible for the podcast here.
No, absolutely. I was just about to say, if we were to sum it up, it's like, it's so beautiful that you're saying that for us to actually have a future proofed career and life actually moving forward is we need to dig deep and use actually our five senses, right? To be able to be human, to define the future for ourselves, to be that captain, right? To have the empathy and also to pay attention. I love that you said that. We need to pay attention. It's not just about like, being in the present moment, being fully present. It's actually really paying attention to what is being said because they actually have clues that sort of already define what the future is like. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, these are all fantastic points that are in Maulik's book, Future Proof Your Career and Company. Maulik, for my last question, I know I've already been like picking your brains a lot on how we can future proof our lives, for the businesses and individuals out there who are listening and who are really like inspired to make that change right now, right? To be able to step into that digital revolution you were talking about earlier, what should be their first step in future proofing their career and their business venture?
Sure. So I think if you distill the book down to one sentence, it's basically do not become an expert. Instead, become an expert student. Because as soon as you become an expert, you become complacent. You start thinking you have arrived, you have nothing more to learn. But future belongs to those who are lifelong learners. So when I look at my 3-year-old daughter, she is my inspiration right now because she's not an expert at anything, but she is an expert student. No matter what I put in front of her, she figures it out. So I wish that all of us adults can continue to have the same sense of desire to learn, the same curiosity that the young kids have. So if the only thing, if you can take away from the book, if there is only one thing that you have to take away, and that is just don't be an expert, become an expert student.
I love it. See, actually, I think Maulik, of all of your talents, it's actually to be able to condense a 40,000 word book into one sentence. But actually, while it is so true, and I love what Maulik said, being an expert student, because we all have to go back to our inner child. Sometimes we're so boxed in, right, by society and obligation and what is expected of us. We tend to forget that our inner child just wants to keep on learning and finding solutions Your 3-year-old daughter being able to figure things out as they come, learning through the process and letting that learning transform you. While Maulik was able to summarize it, ladies and gentlemen, he has so many great experiences and stories in that book. When we read it, it was like a fast page turner because it's so relevant. It's not only relevant, but it is very meaningful. And Maulik, if you would allow me to use the words you used earlier, the future is meaningful because it's our own, right? And nobody should be able to define that future but yourself. And that's why this book actually allows you to take the reins of your own life and say, yes, I've got it and I want to move forward, even if the future is unknown, like what you said. So, Maulik, at this point, I want you personally to invite folks to what's happening that's super important next week. I wanted you to do the honors because it's such a beautiful milestone, and I absolutely want our B2B listeners to be part of the magic. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bea. So on November 14th, Saturday at 10:30 a.m., we are officially launching the book through an online interactive book launch. And unlike other book launches where an author basically, gives you a long, boring soliloquy about the book, we are doing something very different because we are expert students. We are not experts. We are inviting other people we can learn from. And we have invited 6 global leaders coming from a variety of disciplines, and they will be sharing their insights on how to future-proof your career and company. So if you want to participate in it, I invite you to go to my Facebook page, which is at I am Maulik Parekh. And you can register for that event, or you can go to my website at maulikparekh.com.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, November 14, 10:30 a.m. Manila time, Maulik is going to be officially launching his book, Futureproof, Your Career and Company. And I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, his lineup of speakers is absolutely fantastic. If there's one thing you should be doing on November 14, that's a Saturday, it is to be an expert student. Because again, like what Maulik says, our future is unknown, but if we define it ourselves, then we're going to have a fantastic and fun ride. So, Maulik, at this point, I would just like to ask you if there was food for thought that you want to leave our listeners with to take with them for the rest of the week, what would it be?
Become a change evangelist. Embrace change that is around you, and become a catalyst for positive change for your life, but also for the lives around you. If you can do that, then your future is not only future proof, but it's also very meaningful and transformational.
Absolutely. And I love that because for my own reality bite, listening to Maulik speak about change and how the future is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, is this. It's like change is always going to be constant. We all know that. But remember what Maulik said earlier, we can't also passively see and experience change happen without doing something about it. So if you want to transform your life, if you want to transform your career, if you want to transform your company, you have to start today. And I'm going to tell you right now that starting that requires you to be an expert student, and to start off your expert student journey, you have to get a copy of Maulik's book. So once again, that's Future Proof Your Career and Company by Maulik Parekh. Maulik, thank you so much for being part of B2B, for sharing your wisdom, but more importantly, for touching our hearts and being a catalyst of positive change for our team. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bea, for having me. It has been such a pleasure, and look forward to being with you again very soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Maulik. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's episode of B2B Breakfast to Business, all about change, but more importantly, future-proofing that change so that we can take a hold of our future. So, once again, this is Bea Lim with Mr. Maulik Parekh, our author extraordinaire and very inspiring keynote speaker with us here at B2B Breakfast to Business. For more information on the podcast, you may visit our social media channels. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and of course, our beautiful website, www.teamasia.com. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There's going to actually be more talk on change very soon. So stay tuned for episode 14 where we talk about actually being that catalyst for positive change. Maraming salamat and see you guys next week here at B2B Breakfast to Business.